On yet another occasion, a few nights ago, when I was possessed by some distant, serendipitous sorceress and forced with unfettered glee to query that almighty oracle of Mountain View for yet more idiosyncratic information in the midst of a mighty feast of already capricious cogitations, I came to find that English is, in more ways than one, the most widely spoken language on planet Earth. It was always my understanding, probably thanks to the world-class education of my Southern public school experience, that the various dialects of Mandarin held that distinction, what might colloquially be called Chinese. But no. Ample evidence suggests that not only is English the most widely spoken language by pure number of speakers, but is also the most widely spoken over the Earth's geography, and the fastest growing language when measured by speaker increase over both the last decade and the last century. As has been described by many, it is the so-called language of the skies, the standard language used between pilots and ground controllers over most of the world. On a domestic flight between two Japanese cities, both the pilots and the towers discuss business in a language primarily spoken on the other side of the world. Now, the most empathetically enlightened among you will understand that this is quite simply because of the incorrigible imperialism and calamitous colonialism of both the British and American empires, with dishonorable mentions for our colonizer cousins in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And given that this video, by the very nature of its production, will be primarily seen by my fellow native English speakers, I'd like to categorically say that this is therefore not a thing to be boastful or proud of. To do so is the height of imperious ignorance, and it rubs dirt into wounds and spits on the graves of good-natured and valiant human beings who rose and continue to rise in resistance to the abuse and atrocities committed by aristocratic Anglo-authoritarians. The very language we speak is further evidence that we are the byproduct beneficiaries of brutal, bitter, barbaric beings bereft of basic human decency. I will never know the feeling of being forced through no consequence of my own action to have to learn an entirely new language just to be secure in your person, your property, your prosperity and posterity. The various human beings I've had and will continue to have the good fortune of meeting from across my country and across our world should know that I will never judge, make fun of, or callously correct your attempts to communicate with me as one human being to another, whether you are a native English speaker or not. We were born into a world we did not create, products of a birth lottery that is supremely unfair, victims of dastardly, despicable differentiation that begins from the moment we scream ourselves alive. To make noise is to live, but to be understood is to be human. I've long maintained that we pay far too much attention to our opposable thumbs and our aptitude for tool-making as the primary roots of our civilization. No, we spoke and were heard. We gave meaning to breath, made an exhale, an apple. And it is precisely this precious, piecemeal pattern of inhales and exhales that we have to thank for our present state of being. First through our body, then through our grunts, and now through tiny reverberations in our vocal cords and practiced unconscious movements of our tongues, we convey the very depths of our capacious consciousness. Or do we, Because I'd wager one of the first things we almost certainly notice about our varied and storied languages is just how maddeningly imperfect they are at true conveyance. They are carefully curated machines, categorized ecosystems of both feelings and phenomena, the hapless hubris of humankind's attempt to make solid and divisible a raging, unfathomable sea. Language is an annoying thing. Words are watered-down whiskey, and you'll never convince me they taste otherwise. To be so aware of the real thing, to have felt it deeply and profoundly, snatched it from the greedy grasp of God's goosebumps, then flip frantically through thick thesauri, dig deeply into dickish dictionaries, all the while taunted by the realization that the world's most spoken, most expansive, fastest growing language possesses not a pittance of pity, not one word, one definition, one synonym for what you've just experienced. To be gaslit by your own language is to experience the banal horror of the human condition. After 12,000 years of agriculture-based civilization and 6,000 years of human writing systems, there is rarely, if ever, an entirely appropriate word for what we think or what we feel. Our emotions, our thoughts, our very meaning and depth of being quite literally live on the tips of our tongues. But this is where I should mention that there are two other facts about the English language that up to now I've neglected to mention. Before I tell you them, let me shock you a little with a few statistics about worldwide literacy. For nearly all of human history since the invention of writing, an incredibly elite cabal made up almost exclusively of the religious authorities and the abhorrent aristocracy that owned the land the peasants, serfs, and slaves worked, that's us, by the way, were the only ones who could read or write. In 1820, near the end of the first Industrial Revolution, still only 1 in 10 people were literate. In 1900, we hit 2 in 10, then pushed over 4 in 10 in 1960. What has happened since is nothing short of miraculous. In the last 60 years, the literacy rate of the human species has more than doubled to nearly 9 in 10. That's of all human beings, all genders, in every part of our beautiful world. We can not only speak, but read and write now. And it is impossible to overstress the liberating power this has given to previously and currently exploited peoples. But it has also come with the attempt by social and economic elites to control language. Adherence to rules on proper communication is literally a dividing line between the classes. But native English speakers will not be surprised to discover that this pressure is entirely social in nature. The bounds of geography primarily shape what is socially acceptable to say, the y'alls and yenses of human expression. It would be seen as ludicrous and the height of government interference if in any of the English-dominated nations of the world a government body began to dictate what was and was not a word, where apostrophes must be placed, how to correctly spell the word shizzle, clearly denoted for all to see, in Hansard or the Federal Register. It is simply not done. No English-dominated nation, nor any supranational entity, not even England itself, makes any official attempt to control or regulate the English language. So, who does? Well, no one. There is no recognized body anywhere in the world which owns, controls, or even trims the imperfections and idiosyncrasies of English at all. For lack of a better way of putting it, English is an open source language, controlled only by the consent of its users. And every native English speaker is probably nodding along like, yeah, that's how that works. Did you just figure that out, you little ramble rascal? But for most languages in the world, there is at least some type of quasi-government or recognized language regulator or authority, a place you can go to confirm the actual rule for a grammar or spelling dispute. Anyone who's played Scrabble in English has known the near monopoly-level frustration of playing a word that's in your dictionary, but not in your opponent's. This makes English functionally unique in that its regulator is simply the person grading your test, or the individual you seek to win to your side. The rules are determined almost exclusively by those in a conversation, something that gets incredibly complicated and contentious in online or open forum settings. It makes English an incredibly ingenuitive language, where I can make up my own words, like ingenuitive. And the best you can do is shove an Oxford English dictionary into my face and appeal to my historically well-founded appreciation as an American for having my English be corrected by a Brit. It flows with the world, invites innovation simply through the lack of any arbiter. And in a world where almost every English word that exists only does so thanks to their curation and culling by French friars, English invaders, and German Junkers, I think we could use a little innovation by those of us pitiful, freshly literate peasants. Don't you think? Which is where my last and favorite fact about English barges through the door. There are over 2 times as many non-native English speakers as native ones. None of the other top 10 languages in the world even comes close to that fact. English isn't a language, it's a second language, a third, a fourth. Yes, it is the crown jewel of multi-imperial arrogance. Everywhere it goes, it threatens the extinction of older, richer, and more beautiful means of human conveyance. What started with Irish, Cornish, and Gaelic came for Navajo, Noongar, and Isizulu. But it is phenomena like Spanglish, Hinglish, and Taglish that give me hope. The fusing of words for which English has no equivalent meaning into a language which has not even an unofficial arbiter breathes new life into old bones. And I cannot begin to overstress how important the evolution of our language is. Our world spins ever faster towards an unknown, unimaginable future. None of our languages stand any match for the world on the horizon. Communication grows only ever more important with every passing second. Every human being who gains the capacity to be heard, to be understood, further multiplies our collective capability to solve problems of which we are not yet even aware. We face technologies we cannot begin to describe, societal upheavals for which we are lucky even to squabble over the naming of. In a distraction-focused, educated society, the linguistics of disaster seem more important than the disaster itself. So I challenge you, dear listener, wherever you are, whatever languages you speak, colonize the colonizer's language. Learn, create, and infuse new words and old into the great bonfire of human communion. Let it burn and rage ever higher and brighter, that we may glean from these flames of passion for each other the meaning we crave, like ravenous beasts in this world and the worlds to come. May you take heart in the knowledge that nothing stands still, and that language itself is changing every second, with you as its shaper, molding us to be better. From one freshly literate peasant to another, thanks for listening.